Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to this new edition of the weekly analysis. Let's start, as usual, with a recap of what happened last week. In short, last week was quite important from a macro data perspective, and also in terms of technical expirations. There was the OPEX expiration, so a double witching. Honestly, I expected this might bring a bit more volatility, but that didn't happen. On the contrary, volatility is actually decreasing, so we have to acknowledge this new scenario. This means that the markets continue to remain resilient. Basically, whatever news comes out, everything that happens is more or less absorbed in a short time, and the market continues to be supported, especially as we've mentioned in previous editions, by the wall control funds, which essentially operate in a low volatility environment. So the lower the volatility drops, the more by mandate they are essentially required to enter the market, and this means that the market may rise slowly, but it keeps going up. This week, last week there was a brief spike simply due to rumors about Powell being dismissed early by Trump, which was later denied. However, it was definitely a test for the markets. In the event that such news were to actually happen, the markets have shown that even this would basically be absorbed more or less quickly. We'll see what developments might follow. This week, from a macroeconomic perspective, we have Tuesday in particular. Today, there's basically nothing important in terms of data releases, and tomorrow as well, except for Powell's speech. And we'll see in short what his stance will be. Then later on, the blackout period will begin for the FOMC meeting, so no FOMC member will be able to, give interviews or hold conferences. On Tuesday evening, we also have a speech by Lagarde from the ECB. We'll see what she has to say as well, although the impact of Lagarde's speeches is definitely less of a market mover compared to Powell's. Then on Friday, we have existing home sales, which, especially now when the real estate market seems a bit stagnant, could definitely provide further indications. We also have crude oil inventories again on Wednesday. Then moving on to Thursday, we have the EU interest rate decision from the European Union, and there should be this further rate cut. And we then have the US jobless claims. And I remind you that we are in the middle of earnings season, so this week as well there are several big companies reporting. I remember glancing over them quickly. Honestly, I don't recall all of them, but I think I read that this Wednesday or Thursday Google should be reporting. So let's pay close attention, because definitely after the market closes, they can really give a strong input to overnight movements. That said, let's move on, and as usual, take a look from an operational perspective at what we can expect for this week. Let's start with the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq for now, on Friday, found a good upward push that led prices to break out of the initial monthly range, even going so far as to almost test the monthly MR1 level. At the moment, since the opening of the retail hour, the price is actually going to test the highs recorded at Friday's open. Let's see if they will manage, if we manage in short to break this range, maybe find points of equilibrium higher up. Certainly, we could also see AA move back down, because after all, a new week is starting, so we have to refer to the initial weekly range, even though at the moment the trend still seems to be the same. We have higher highs and higher lows, so even though of course the movement needs to be put into context, especially with the US market still closed obviously, but certainly the European session has opened with these signals. So let's obviously keep an eye on the range. A break of the UR0 level could easily bring prices, first of all, to test the MR1 level, which is around 23,380 or so, and then possibly continue further. Let's see how it goes. Once the established trading range is decisively broken, the probabilities and chances that the prevailing trend will continue its progression are probably significantly higher than those of a complete reversal. However, a reversal is also a possibility that we need to keep in mind. As I always say, we need to have a range of scenarios available and be ready to apply our strategy based on the scenario we are facing. Let's move on to ES, of course. Here it comes. ES, in short, is in a similar situation. It too is going to test the MR1 level, so is definitely a good, certainly a good moment for the American indices. I repeat, even though volatility remains low, the momentum is still upward. So at the moment we've broken out of the previous range. You can see how it went back to retest it just last night, and now it's moving to retest the upper part. So breaking through these levels, specifically VR0, could easily lead prices to test the areas of 6,380 or even 6,400 for sure. On the downside, of course, we also need to monitor the weekly range here, because at the moment it's still ranging. If the weekly range is broken, then there would be an immediate continuation of the trend on the monthly trend, so we can focus more on bullish trades. I would definitely avoid short positions unless we reach significant levels. In short, we can try some contrarian trades, obviously, as per the strategy. Let's move on to the other two American futures that we follow, of course. Let's start with the Dow Jones. Here it is. Here too, the situation is similar. At the moment, we're in the upper part of the weekly range, even though we are still quite far from testing the highs recorded on Friday. So usually during the night hours, for these indices, both the Dow Jones and the Russell, the volumes are really very low, so they can't really do much. Therefore, we might expect at the open some kind of test of the higher level, which is VR0, which is roughly at 44,715. A break of this level could certainly, first of all, lead to a test of the highs recorded on Friday, and if those are broken, it could then allow prices to test their higher weekly levels like VR2, as well as the weekly VIX cluster area. This would also mean breaking through the other high at 45,032, so definitely a break of this high as well could really trigger a strong upward move. On the downside, of course, we need to monitor the VS0 and VS1 levels, which I consider to be the most important, also referring to these pivots that represent the most recent lows recorded last week. So they will definitely have their influence, especially since they roughly correspond to round numbers in the 44,000 area. So this area of lows should definitely be taken into consideration as well. Let's move on to the Russell. Here it is. The situation here is a bit more similar to the Dow Jones, even though right now we are already pushing against the weekly VR0 level. Breakout could also lead to a test of VR1, and why not the highs that were recorded right at Friday's open. The higher pivot is here at 22,290, so that's the one we need to refer to, even though at first the market will probably also react to this high, but the real one to break, in my opinion, is this one here at 22,290, to allow for a real continuation of this upward movement. So let's keep an eye on this area here. Maybe for the Russell we can widen the initial range a bit on the upside, since it immediately started moving up and didn't even test the VHWHV level, so the weekly level, and just took off to the upside right away. So VR1 at this moment seems to me to be the first important resistance that needs to be overcome, along with this area of C3 volatility from Friday. On the downside, let's obviously keep an eye on VS0 and VS1 as the first targets, since this is definitely a level that the market will tend to protect for sure. Let's also take a look at the DAX. Here it is, which on Friday continued well. It also had a good performance at the open, only to pull back quite a bit afterwards. Well, quite a bit pulled back, a few hundred points, which isn't that much really, considering the overall value of the index. At the moment, we're trading below the HV level. The market has been open for about an hour, so we already have a bit more to go on. But basically, we're still within the initial weekly range, so we can easily frame this as a week that's starting off in a range. If it breaks upward, of course, we'll be watching VR0, because breaking VR0 would also mean breaking this high here, this area that was tested, first broken, then retested from below, and then continued upward. So this is definitely an area to keep in mind, which also corresponds to today's RD1 level around 24,460. A break of this area could easily bring prices back up to test the 24,580 area, which represents the highs recorded last week. On the downside, we are monitoring the VS0, which is also the weekly range level, so it could go back to retest it as it already did last night, almost forming a double bottom before bouncing back. Once the pivot was broken, it started to move up strongly again, and now it has gone back to retest. We are currently retesting the upper part, so we could see either a continuation at this level or a new test with more substantial volume in this area. As for the commodities, let's start with OIL. Here it is. At the present moment, the overall situation is appearing to be a bit compressed. We are still operating well within the established BC3 levels. That is to say, we are remaining within the confines of the weekly range levels. Let's remove the daily for a moment. There it is, just to get a clearer view. So the range is quite narrow, quite tight to the downside, obviously, but let's keep an eye on this area here, which is meant to be zero. But there's also the monthly level a bit lower, so it's definitely an important area that will be defended. A breakout could trigger much stronger movements. Let's say bearish, maybe down to a test of the monthly WHW, unless it ends up breaking through it, maybe testing the weekly range, or rather the monthly range, which as we said has its lower level around 62.4 or more or less. So let's keep an eye on these two range levels, first the weekly one and then the monthly one, because there could be a test. Obviously on the upside, if it breaks through VR0, we can also expect well, a test of these highs here, which were recorded last week, at the beginning of last week, around the 68.20 area, for a possible further move up towards the weekly VIX area. On the downside, of course, VS0 could trigger a test of the weekly VIX levels, definitely, unless, of course, this level is broken, which I consider the first, the most important initial support. We have a double level here, so I will definitely be monitoring this level closely. Let's also move on. So let's take a look at gold, a situation we'll monitor right away. Let's remove, okay, this, let's switch to the monthly view. Okay. Okay, let's remove this table for a moment. Just bear with me for a moment. Here it is. Okay. Here, let's take a more comprehensive and detailed look at the current situation for a moment, observing all the intricate aspects and nuances. Please hold on for a brief period, as it appears that everything has completely and unexpectedly frozen, becoming entirely unresponsive and still creating a significant and perplexing pause in our progress. Well, the entire platform completely froze, and I'm truly unsure why this occurred. Let me just carefully close it for a brief moment, choosing to close it without saving any changes. I will then attempt to reconnect to the system. Yes, that's the plan. Here it is, GC. Here it is. Perfect. Let's remove this again, switch to monthly, remove the daily, and take a look. We are already at high levels on the weekly level, so it's definitely a week starting with a bullish tone, and now let's look at it in relation to the weekly level. We're in the ranges, actually. I meant to say in the monthly range. We're above MR0, so with an upward trend. Let's see if it freezes again. Know where it is. Perfect. So as we were saying, we're already working on MR1. A break of this level could easily bring prices back to test MR2, which then represents the lower part of this movement that characterized this area of highs recorded last week. So MR2 is absolutely important. If it breaks this area here, so 3.8 or 3.90, it could easily recover this zone around 4.30. On the downside, of course, we are monitoring, because it could also re-enter the monthly range and maybe go for a test to the downside of MS0, but also of the MHW level. So let's keep an eye on it, because if it re-enters the range, the first level they would definitely test is, of course, 3.90, which represents MR0, MM, okay? Having looked at gold, we still need to look at the SPX. Still on a monthly basis, we're working right around MR1, just below, in short, the breakout again of the 6,300, 6,313 area, which was the high recorded last week. Could trigger a nice move, maybe up to 6,340 or 6,350. If we add the weekly level, it more or less matches the VR2 level for this week. So this could definitely be a target area in the event of a bullish breakout. On the downside, let's keep an eye on 6,284 because returning to the range could lead the price to retest the lower part of the range, both of VS0 and VS1 for this week. Actually from last week, because obviously this will update as soon as the market opens. So the monthly level 6,200, but this is actually the MR0 level, which at this moment will definitely act as support since it hasn't been breached. We still have to take a look at some cryptocurrencies. So let's start with Bitcoin, which had a nice upward push last week, as did Ethereum, especially due to some rumors about BlackRock wanting to, well, create a sort of alternative exchange. We'll see. I read some news about it, but just in passing, I haven't really looked into it in depth. Anyway, it's a market that right now is just above the weekly range we've already seen, and we'll probably go on to test the area of the highs to see if there's possibly a breakout. On the downside, instead, we're monitoring the monthly MR2 level, which we've broken through and then retested from above. And then this orange line started this MR2 level you see here. I was talking about Ethereum, which I wanted to show you. Here it is. It has clearly broken out of the monthly range, so there was a strong surge, and it was really impressive, a bullish spike with a lot of volume. At the moment, it has formed a double top, but I would still expect the movement to continue, given how things are set up, also for this week. Of course, we're monitoring the VR0 level right now, which represents both the high and, at this point, the first resistance the price might encounter. At this moment, this whole area here serves as the first target because it's basically a cluster of daily levels. Obviously, given the volatility, we could also end up testing the weekly levels, weekly VIX area, which is definitely attractive since it's more or less around 4,000. So that's another round number reached for this asset. Perfect. We've reached the end of this weekly analysis. As always, I invite you to follow me on social media, leave a like on the video, and we'll catch up later in the chat. Thank you all for your attention.